thank you so very much, Sunny. That was an absolutely lovely introduction. Truly, I appreciate it. And I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I have to say, I have gotten used to Zoom learning in this COVID world, but Chef Doug, I am so sorry this is not in person because I really want to taste all of that charoset. That looks amazing. So thank you so much for having me here. So I wanted to speak a bit about the Seder plate and how does the Seder plate intersect with our Jewish values and social justice and Israel? Because I think that sometimes we can think that the Seder plate is just this sort of old ritual. It's just one of those ritual objects. They're it's beautiful. We have it in our cabinet. We bring it out every Pesach. And here we have our charoset. If you can see, I'll show you my Seder plate that I'm working off of here. So let's talk a little bit. And I please welcome you. I do not want to be talking for the next 15 minutes, but what I want to talk about what is on a Seder plate, and then what are some things that we can add. So we have charoset, and pardon me, Chef Doug, if you've spoken about this already. What does charoset symbolize?
The mortar.
Yeah, absolutely. The mortar or the bricks. There we go. Go ahead, Greg.
I was listening.
Oh, you were listening. Thank you. Thank you. And what about our maror? Our spicy horseradish.
Tears.
Tears, yeah, when we were crying, absolutely. Karpas, our greens.
Light.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. What about beitzah, egg?
The lifestyle.
Life.
Life, like that.
Birth, life, renewal.
Yeah, life, birth, renewal, absolutely. Bobby, were you going to say something too?
No, that I always have a vegan Seder, and so, I listen to this, but I mean it. I use seeds, sunflower seeds.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And for a vegan Seder, instead of zeroa, the shank bone, you can also use beets, I will say. Why would you put beets, or why would you put a shank bone?
Because that's how the angel of death knew to pass over the homes.
Yeah.
The blood. That seems kind of gross to a vegan. So I use a yam, and I've noticed in the Haggadah I wrote, it says God's outstretched arm, like a number of times.
Yeah.
It refers to God's outstretched arm. I have to say, just listening to the differences and such, it really makes me understand. I mean, I had many years not being a vegan, and then I really understood it when, I did something with it.
I'm so glad.
Explanation. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. You're most welcome. And then just one last one, chazeret, a different greens. No? Oh, yes, Jessica, did I see your hand? Oh, never mind, you were just stretching. A chazeret is sort of the same. Chazeret and karpas, the parsley, and the egg are all really about new life and growth. So this is our traditional Seder plate, right? It's fantastic to have the Seder plate. It is what we speak of, what we know are coming out from our exodus from Egypt for 2,000 years, right? But I want to suggest some other things that you may not have heard of. We'll start off with, maybe you know this one, an orange. Have you ever seen an orange on a Seder plate? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Now that was a hand, Jessica, I saw that.
An orange belongs on a Seder plate like a woman belongs on the bima.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. A woman belongs on the bima. And you know what? Professor Susanna Heschel, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's daughter, actually said that this came from in the 1980s when there was so much discussion of gay and lesbians in synagogue. And she said that this actually came from the thought of there's much room for a lesbian in Judaism as there is for a crust of bread on the Seder plate. So a small movement wanted to put bread on the Seder plate, and they thought, you know what, that's way too sacrilegious. So instead, that's why we have an orange on the Seder plate for LGBTQ rights. And then you spit out orange seeds, which are sort of there to represent homophobia. So what about an olive? I put an olive on my Seder plate. Has anyone ever heard of an olive? An olive.
An olive, but I've never heard of an olive on a Seder plate.
An olive is a new thing according to the Shalom Center for Israel. Why the olive? Because for millennia, the olive branch has been the symbol of peace, and we seek to make peace when there has been war. The reason I love the symbol of the olive is because that doesn't say how we're going to get that peace, right? There is no political pressure to get that peace through one specific policy or another. But we are for Israel, and we are for the well-being of Israel. And when we put an olive, it brings a discussion of, okay, what does it mean to extend that branch? How are we going to make that happen? And how can we as advocates bring about peace for Israel? Here's another one. And I love this one just because I love sweets. Fair trade chocolate. Put a little piece of chocolate on your Seder plate. What does fair trade represent in general when I say that phrase?
Working conditions are decent, not young children.
Absolutely. Economic partnerships that are based on equality, right? Labor issues, sustainable environmental practices. When we put something fair trade, and I say chocolate, it specifically, it's so when you create a product, it reminds us that no, we need to be advocates for all of those who can't fight for themselves. Reminds me of why some will also put a tomato on the Seder plate. Who has not been getting vaccinated in record numbers in California? And who have been working?
Farm workers.
Yeah, and they have been in our fields, absolutely. So truah.org, Truah, right? Rabbinic organization, or a Jewish organization promoting rights, right? Says that it brings the tomato brings to our attention the oppression and liberation of farm workers who harvest fruits and vegetables. And it helps remind us of our power to create justice in this world. Same thing for an acorn. When I was just watching I have a fourth grader, and he is learning about Native Californians, and he was learning about the Tongva people and how important the acorn was to their way of life. And he said the Tongva have been fighting for liberation just like we have been at Pesach. And I said, that's brilliant. My fourth grader can't be the only one to have made this connection, right? And it turns out, no, that Piedmont, California, Kehila Community Synagogue started putting an acorn on the Seder plate to weave together discussions of indigenous land. And how do we take ownership of this land, and how do we acknowledge where it's from, right? Now, remember, all of these are you don't just want to put it on the Seder plate, just like you never just want to put the egg on the Seder plate. You want it to be a talk, right? It's the same thing when we have the shank bone. Doesn't mean anything, but Bobby, when you talk about the outstretched arm of God, that has meaning to us, right? So whatever additions, it's meant to spark discussion and thought and to bring our story of the Exodus even closer to us. In 2015, Elan Kurdi, he was 3 years old, and his brother Galip were found washed up on the Turkish shore. They were refugees from Syria. Does anyone remember that in the news? And his father, Abdullah, survived this journey and shared a story about his son, that this was one of the biggest flights, right? Since World War II, one of the biggest refugee crises. And what he had most wanted to do was to bring his son bananas because they were sweetness. And in war-torn Syria, that's what he could get that would give him hope. So some synagogues have been putting a banana on their Seder plate to think of refugees, that this is a way. And how can we act? What can we do? Are we going to donate money? How are we going to vote? What are ways that we are going to take part right? Whether we protest, whatever we do, even if we just have these discussions, how can putting that banana on the Seder plate honor this family, this little boy and his brother and his mother who had died, in their hope for a better life? Just as we are, you know, coming out from our narrow place, from our Mitzrayim, always hoping for better. What time is it? I want to make sure we give enough time. Oh my gosh, it's 6:57. So one last one, which is, you may have this already. This is a much more traditional one, but I always want to mention it. Miriam's cup. Does anyone have a Miriam's cup as aside from an Elijah's cup? Bobby, you want to tell us about Miriam's cup?
Well, I always think of Miriam and the water. We have water in like a beautiful glass because, well, Miriam saved Moses's life. Correct. Yeah.
She did.
She did it. Yeah. And then there's a song about Miriam, and somehow it seems to take a lot of prominence in the women's seders.
It does, because Miriam is the one who brought the water to the Jewish people, right? It said that the well followed Miriam. The very first prayer for healing, El na rafa na la, is what Moses said, please God heal her, when Miriam was afflicted with leprosy. The reason why we have all the words of the Mishaberach prayer comes from Miriam, who's known for healing, who is known for water, the wellspring of life. And so I would encourage all of us to keep it. It doesn't need to be just in the women's seders. It needs to be in all seders, right? These are rights of gender and equality for all of us. How can we make our world better through all of these additions to the Seder plate, right? So the issues of 2,000 years ago of coming out and of our Exodus is ongoing, just in different ways. So this Pesach, I would encourage us to pick one addition or two or something that has meaning for you and bring these discussions into the Seder. As we have our choroset and as everyone is eating their Hillel sandwiches, right? What is an issue that you feel passionate about that you want to bring to the forefront? So it will truly be Exodus for everyone.
That was wonderful.
Thank you, Michal. You all can see why she's so brilliant and multi-talented, and I'm absolutely in love with Rabbi Loving, and I can't wait for you all and our delegation to get to know her more and just learn from her great wisdom and the beauty she brings in this world. Thank you so much for your time, Rabbi.